Hi, everybody. Jack O'Malley with a Monday update. I thought I'd touch base with you on a few things. A couple of things that I thought I'd start with. It's Monday. Keep it fairly light. A few comments and things that people have mentioned or emailed me or sent me some kind of social media message about that I just thought I'd touch base on. Because I've seen it kind of a reoccurring thing. This gentleman said, "Not sure why I still follow this guy." Maybe hoping to see a collective spine grow in Congress. Well, just for the record, I'm not a congressman. So if you confuse me with a congressman, we got an issue because I'm a representative and your congressman is a representative. U.S. representative, state representative. I am not a congressman. They call, obviously, the U.S. congressman or representative congressman. I'm not a congressman. I deal in Lansing. I do not deal in Washington. I have zero say what goes on in Washington, D.C., okay? And it's important because a lot of people see representative, they just think it's Congress. Well, Lansing and Washington are two different animals, and I think you realize that. But just know I and my colleagues in the State House have zero say in what happens in Washington, D.C. So I think that's important. Sometimes they can get confused, and at times they're confusing enough. Let's see here. Another person commenting on businesses. Why don't they just open up our businesses with a lockdown? And I'm going to touch base on that in just a second, something else. But just open up. So this has been brought up. 2 counties in the Upper Peninsula. I'm going to get them wrong, so I won't use their names. But 2 counties in the UP, their county boards have passed resolutions saying we're not going to enforce any of the governor's restrictions, and their sheriff and their prosecuting attorneys have signed on in those counties. Here is an important thing: the business associations, small business and such and such, have said, hey, just know, businesses, if you have a license or a permit with the state, they can still be revoked, right? You could still have penalties. So if you're going to follow that, just know that. And I also had a restaurateur tell me a while back when I said, why don't you just open up? And he said, I'd love to, but if I lose my liquor license, then my mortgage loan goes bye-bye because that loan is tied to the liquor license. So there's lots of things to be considered here. So even though a county government might say something like that, and the 2 people that would, or 2 groups that would enforce, if you will, sheriff and prosecuting attorney, have signed on, there are still sticky issues there. So I just say that to move forward. So why don't they all just open up? Well, those are some of the reasons. That's one reason why I would like to see less licensure in the state of Michigan. I know when the salons and barbers and whatnot were going, there was a legislation that would remove that licensing. A lot of people thought we were trying to shut them down. I think associations could certify people. That takes it away from the state, so to speak. But there are rules in place that the barber salon associations would go. Realtors are in the same way. Let the Realtors Association certify that so-and-so is qualified. So just a thought for future down the road. Let's see here. One of the things too on that front, there's been discussion. How do we move forward against the governor? Sue. There's another. Why don't you just sue? Well, we have sued. Also, restaurants and lodging have sued. Bowling alleys have sued, and they've lost in court. So as I've said, the governor may be just barely this side of legal. We'll see how it all pans out. But to just lawsuits, well, we can do them, but what if we lose? Or we write new statute and we send it to her desk and she doesn't sign it. It's a nasty game. Now, incoming appropriations chair in the House, Thomas Albert, is saying, hey, we've got federal CARES dollars and so on and so forth. If you want to talk to us, Governor, then you need to open up the economy. And if you don't, we're going to listen to you like you've listened to us for the last 8 or 9 or 10 months, and we're not going to do anything with you. And his comment was, Until the governor stops overstepping her authority, she will have as much input in the budget process as she has afforded the legislature and the people of Michigan during this pandemic. We move forward. Let's see here. What else do we want to talk about? And the other thing is the governor of New York, Cuomo, he's now saying, we've got to open up or there won't be an economy to come back to. You think, Governor? You finally figuring that out? So maybe Governor Cuomo could call Governor Whitmer and explain that to her as we move forward. I want to touch base on the freedom of speech issue. I was a guy who worked my entire career in radio. Free speech was very important to me. I realized that I had free speech when I was on the airwaves to a point. My boss, my owner, the owner of the station, held that license, which means I had free speech, and he was great. He did really nothing. But potentially, if I said something against maybe his family or a client that he didn't like, my free speech would get pulled back. Why? Because he was my employer. So free speech is political free speech out in the town square. That's one thing. But there are limits on free speech, right? But with that said, we do need to move forward and be very careful with our social media platforms. We all hit accept without even reading that fine print. But it is questionable when these social media outlets start pulling people's accounts, blocking them, or putting comments up. Because realistically, who is the one to decide what's fair and what isn't, right? That is free speech. But technically, legally, they do have that right. And that doesn't mean moving forward here, we don't do something about that. That section 230 in the rules of the FCC, I don't want to just do away with it. I think it needs to be tweaked. But that's a discussion for your congressman in that regard. We'll see what maybe there's some things we could do here in the state of Michigan from your state representative standpoint. But just be advised, technically and legally, they do have the right. Should they be doing it? I don't think so. But I just want to touch base on that because it is getting a lot of discussion. Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. National holiday. I don't claim to be an expert on the man. I've read a little bit about him, reading a book about him right now. But from what I've seen and what I've heard and what I remember as a young whippersnapper, he was a pretty special guy. Was he perfect? No, none of God's children are perfect, right? We are all flawed humans. And he may have done some things that people can poke fingers at and say, well, see, he's not that great a guy, et cetera, et cetera. None of us are perfect, right? We're all sinners, and we're doing our best to be the best. And I think Martin Luther King Jr. was a pretty special guy. And, we use his holiday today to remember. There was a lot of discussion this summer with regards to racial situations in America. And I won't get too deep into it right now. And this isn't the forum for that. But I do want to remember a couple of conversations I had this summer with blacks, constituents. And it was pointed out, I said, Jack, have you ever been walking down the street with a buddy and had a car of young white guys yell racial slurs at you? Or I guess reverse it, black guys yelling racial slurs at you? I said, no. And he said, my children, when they're out on the sports fields and, trash talking, some of the racial comments that are made to my kids. And he said, when my kids started hearing those things, that's when I knew I had to act and speak up. So he's absolutely right. The old, have you walked a mile in my shoes? I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Basically a single mom. My dad died when I was young. Single mom. We were poor. So, you don't know my story. I don't know your story. I don't know all the stories, but I do know this. We're all God's children and we are all equal. And so on this day, we need to remember that and we need to strive. No father black, white, green, red, whatever, should hear that his children have been racially intimidated. Nobody walking down the street should hear it yelled from a passing car. So let's just remember that as we move forward. And Martin Luther King Jr., a very special man, nonviolent, just saying, hey, we're all equal. And he's right. So with that, I leave you on this Monday. Please pray for me. Pray for all your leaders. I'll continue to pray for you, this great state, and this great country. All right? Have a good evening, everybody.